Could your daily routine be full of hormone disruptors? There are more than 1,000 hormone disruptors living rent-free in our environment right now. In our food, our water, the air we breathe, the clothes we wear, our skincare, they all mess with our hormones. The good news is we don't have to suffer through it anymore because now we have Hormone Harmony, a formula made only with herbal ingredients that are shown to reduce hormonal symptoms of women of all ages. Since I've been using Hormone Harmony, I have felt more balanced, and other women feel the same way. The biggest benefit, they say, is feeling like myself again. That's what women mention over and over in their reviews, and there are over 30,000 reviews for Hormone Harmony. For a limited time, you can get 15% off your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use the code DATEABLE at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use the code DATEABLE for 15% off today.
Hi, I'm Yue Xu.
And I'm Julie Kraftchick.
We're active daters turned dating insiders.
Here to dive into everything modern dating and relationships.
Welcome to Dateable. Hello, friends.
Welcome back to another episode of Dateable in our off-on season, the book launch period.
Sorry, there's like a giggle every time we talk that way. Welcome to the situationship period of our podcast.
It really is. No, I think there's a defined period right now because How to Be Dateable is coming out in like a week. It's crazy.
Fuck. Wow. It's here. It's finally here. We've been saying that for a while. It's almost here. It's almost here. It's here.
Yeah, no, it is here. We have finally made it. And, you know, I love about this time, this interviewing time. You interviewed me last week, and I'm here to do the same for Yue. I will be digging in to Yue's life.
Barbara Walters
all
style.
the nosy people out there. But no, I think you have learned a lot. I've seen so much growth in you the last year. I think, like, obviously we'll kind of stick to this theme of this year for you of like finding love again, but also more importantly, finding yourself. Because, you know, for the listeners that have been with us, 2023 was a hard year for you. And then 2024 was like that year of revitalization, I think, and just like where you're going now in 2025. So we're going to dive into it all with your relationship with your man friend, as you like to call him. Not a boy.
Not a boy.
Not quite yet a partner. So man friend. And then
what's that song? That Britney song? I'm not a
girl, not yet a woman. Yeah,
not yet a woman.
Yeah.
Then what is she?
This is where your man friend is. He's in the same
what is she?
area.
You're not a girl, not yet a woman.
She's
Are
in
you
the
a
middle.
boy?
She's in the middle. She's in her growth spurt. She's doing it. But,
all right. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to talk about your healing journey and just like, you know, finding yourself. But of course, also professionally, it's been a big year for us with writing a book and then what that brought up for you, you know, from a career perspective, but also writing a book about dating brings up a lot about your personal life, especially when you're writing a book and what happened to you happened in the middle of it, the catastrophic breakup. So really shook things up a little.
Timing.
Yeah. So before we get into it, I'll just give a plug. If you haven't pre-ordered yet, make sure to go get How to Be Dateable. It's all on howtobedateable.com. We also released a couple weeks ago the dating archetype quiz. And I am going to talk about that in the episode too with UAs because I think it's such a good way to get insight into just our approaches and the way we think about dating, what are our real strengths when dating, but also what can get in our way and hold us back. So all on howtobedateable.com and go do it. Okay. Well,
do it.
Let's get into it
now.
So I'm going to copy you and I'm going to start the way that you did for me because I really liked that approach. So what I want you to do is take me back to this time last year, 2024 in January. What was going on in your life?
I think I had just had been like 4 months into my new relationship and we were about to take our first big trip together to London and Paris. And I remember feeling like, wow, I never knew that this is how my life would look like in 2024. Because 2023 in the middle of it in May was when I found out my partner of 5 years, almost 5 years, was cheating on me. And if you had asked me then that, could you imagine fast forward 6, 7 months, then you are now in this new relationship, a much better relationship for me, but also like about to embark on this big trip together. Like, could you even imagine that? And I think I would have been like, fuck no.
Well, I remember the day that we were on a call and you were like, I have something I need to tell you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, what is she going to tell me? Like, I had no idea. I thought you were going to be like, I'm moving to Australia. Like, I was like, what are you talking about? Because it just came out of left field. And then you were like, I have a boyfriend. And I was like, what? Because at that point, this was probably what, like, I think it was like October you told me.
Yes.
And you had been dating for like a bit before. Maybe it was even November. I can't remember. But like, I know.
We started dating in October. Okay. I think I told you in November.
Because I remember you had a very conscious, we're going to be doing this for 30 days, just the two of us. And then we'll bring other people into this. So maybe we could talk about that even, of like, why did you feel like you wanted to do things different in what you called a trial period of those 30 days before necessarily telling your friends and family that you were dating someone?
It was such a different start to a relationship. Normally, I would kind of be like, telling my friends, I met someone, we started dating and things are going well. And then one day it's like, I want to introduce you guys. Now we're in this relationship. What was different about this relationship were two things. One is I had known him for many years. So it wasn't like I just met someone new.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't like that. It was someone who had already been in my life, but not that prominently. But the second major thing that was new for this relationship was that I wanted to take what I learned from the previous relationship where I felt like the relationship got away from us. It became other people's relationship. And I say that because I feel like towards the end of that, it was a lot of what are other people expecting for us to do? What do we think society would want us to do? And it became less about him and I. It became about everybody else involved. And by then, like now you are in your 4th year of your relationship. It's sort of like your lives are so intertwined that the people who are part of your relationship grows and grows. And so by the time towards the end of that last relationship, I felt like we couldn't let people down because there were so many people now in our circle and a lot of mutual friends. So it got away from us. So in this relationship, I was like, nobody's going to know. I didn't tell my parents. Nobody's going to know. Mojo, my dog, barely knew about this guy. Mojo's like, I smell someone new. It was like more, let's work on us and see if it actually works just you and I before we expose the rest of the world to us.
That's such a good point, too, because I remember even in your last relationship, I feel like it was like kind of like you had that moment that you two were like, oh, let's look at each other a little differently. And this could be something. Yes. And then like the next day you're like in a relationship or like spending all this time together. And then you have like all the mutual friends being like, so what's going on? And kind of everyone in your business. So I could see why you wanted to kind of take that space to see if there's even something here before we like go there with everyone.
Yeah. And you and your partner started your relationship during COVID. It's almost kind of like a similar feel. Like you incubate your relationship first before you let the rest of the world take over. And I wanted that. I wanted to create that container for, I know you hate that word container, but I wanted to create that container for our relationship. And what happened in the previous one was that something changed like at year 3 in our relationship. And because I was so focused on what our friends and family wanted, what the next milestones were, I wanted to give people good answers. Like, oh, are you two thinking about marriage? Are you two thinking about kids? And I wanted to give them the right answer, quote unquote, that I overlooked the changes that were happening in our relationship and the way we were treating each other. Looking back, our relationship became pretty contentious towards the end.
Interesting.
Even before the infidelity, and I think I've told you that some things he said to me regarding like, are you really going to eat that if you want to keep your body the way it is? Are you really going to eat that snack? And
so wild.
so wild because I'm like, who am I with? Who is this monster I'm living with? And there were definitely times where I would speak to him or give him a glare that has so much, like, not hatred, but there's so much judgment and criticism that I can see why things started changing, but we chose to ignore it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think I could see that because I feel like once you hit the 3-year mark, I kind of got this too. People start asking, like, what's next? Are you going to get married? And then when you don't, people start to like be like, really, what's happening? Is something wrong? Like all this stuff. Like it's just this societal timelines that we have in place. And I can totally see why just like staying the course. And I actually want to talk about your archetypes. And I've been thinking more about you, Yue. I've been analyzing you.
Thank you.
No, but I think as a large, like we've been talking about these archetypes a lot on different podcasts we've been on. And I think where they get really interesting is the intersection of the two of like, okay, for you, your maverick is your leading one and then achiever is next. And, you know, of course, every dater is still different, even if you fall into one of these archetypes. Like the way achiever might come through for Yue versus me might be very different. And I think adding in this extra layer of the other one, there's something there. So I have a theory on you, but I'm curious, like, have you thought about like the intersection a little more and then like how that maybe has affected your relationships of maybe what's gotten in the way of them, but also maybe assets too?
Okay. I think of it as an intersection of maverick and achiever as pride, as the overlapping quality.
I can see that.
And I feel like I do a lot of things to not let people down, to not lose face, to not be ashamed or bring embarrassment to how people perceive me or how people perceive my family. So I do it at the sacrifice of what I authentically want. And one example of that is at year 3, everybody was like, okay, you're dating this guy who was married before. Do you think he wants to get married again? And would you want to stay in this if he didn't? This question had nothing to do with me. It wasn't like, do you want to get married? Do you want to move forward? Everything was turned around to be like, are you in the right relationship if he doesn't want to marry you? And so marriage became this North Star for me that wasn't even mine. It was just kind of planted into my head. Yeah. So the achiever in me at the time was like, I got to work towards marriage. I went through all the therapy and the mediums and the psychics, you know, it was like I had my whole army of people to, and my question was wrong. But the question at the time was, are we headed for marriage? That question was not about me. The question should have been, do I want this?
Or do I even want marriage with this person? Not even just marriage.
Do I want marriage with this person? Yes. But the question became, are we headed for marriage? And so I was focused on the total wrong thing. And the maverick in me was, okay, things aren't going that well. There is a little contempt between us. There's also a disconnect between us. But the maverick in me is like, no, I'm going to present this strong-willed person who is going to get what she wants and get what she said she wanted. Because I feel like once you put it out publicly to your friends and family, you got to stick to it. And so I just became laser focused on something that I wasn't even sure I wanted.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad I asked you before I gave my take because there's a lot similar that I was thinking about with you too, and I can see everything you said. I was just thinking about your relationship before that, the one that was like 2 years where you were kind of lukewarm on him but stayed in it. And I think a piece of the staying in it with achievers is that there's a sunk cost fallacy, right? You don't want to give up. You don't want to let it go. And then I think with the maverick side too, it's easy to kind of sweep things under the rug and not necessarily confront to get vulnerable. I think you definitely like put it out more in this last relationship than maybe that one. Like that one, I felt like you just kept going and going and like not really talking at all. And then this, like you were confronting it through couples therapy, but maybe that is where there's like an intersection of like, I'm going to keep going, but maybe not get to like the deeper root because that gets vulnerable and scary that then I can get off track too.
That's a very good way of observing that. And what you brought up reminds me of also with the achiever is that I became a self-help junkie in my relationship. Everything was like, oh, things aren't really working out. We're going to power our way through this.
Yeah.
We're going to talk to every therapist, read every book, listen to every podcast, because we're going to power through it. And in turn, we kind of forced ourselves to stay in that relationship. And that's the achiever mindset. You're like, if I work hard enough, if I get these degrees and certifications, I'm going to progress to that next level. And at some point for achievers, we have to take a pause and ask, is what I'm trying to achieve even what I want?
Right.
And am I sacrificing my true self for this?
Right. And I almost think of it with the Maverick too, a little, that it might be easier to go to the self-help than to actually go deep and like confront and ask for what you really need and be vulnerable and let that person fully in. So I think there's still like a little bit of a wall up by turning to all these other things that could be going, or even them, like they're the problem in the sense like,
yes,
you know, instead of just looking at the relationship and being like, ugh, this isn't really what I want.
And to be perfectly transparent, and Julie, you and I have both felt this podcast, being the voices of this podcast, a dating podcast, there is this added pressure and is self-induced of wanting your relationship to be perfect and presenting it in a perfect way. And you know, when that last relationship ended, my first thought was, how am I going to tell our audience? I feel like I'm letting people down.
I can see that.
And even writing this book, this breakup happened in the middle of writing the book. I was like, I had a little shame, just like, am I even qualified now? Because am I letting people down? And it is so exhausting to try to present that you're in a perfect relationship when you're trying to do a dating podcast, when we know that no relationship is perfect. We're all trying to work through shit. And I wish that if looking back, I have no regrets, but looking back, I would have just given myself a little bit more grace in that department.
I think it's really hard, even if you don't have a dating podcast, like with dating, you can be like, oh, this isn't working out because it's not someone that's like invested in your life and integrated. Yeah. But when you're like in a relationship, there's always that question of like, how much publicly do I share? Like how much of it's just the ebb and flow of a relationship versus this is actually not right for me and not a good relationship. Right. So that's a hard balance. I do think though, like you coming, like I remember like what my aunt's sister being like, you guys couldn't have planned this. This was like the best thing for the podcast. I think obviously we had the woman that he cheated on come on the podcast. That was pretty spicy. But I think most of it was that people got to see your journey of coming back. And I think that actually, like, it's easy to go to, people want to see the perfect relationship, but I actually think what's more interesting is that journey, how you actually come out of things, especially in challenging situations. So one thing I observed from you was, I feel like in the past, being single was always like a layover to a relationship. And this time around, you like embraced it and like found yourself during that time. Maybe tell us about that process and like what shifted for you.
And in some ways, I still find myself in the space of single. Like I still feel in some ways I am single with somebody.
Okay.
In a relationship with somebody. Because what this last relationship showed for me, and I often talk about the Truman Show moment where the lights came on and I was like, oh shit, I was like in this social experiment. That's how I felt after that last relationship. And the only constant in my life is myself, is me. And I don't need to talk about the success of relationships because you can't control that. Anything can happen in a relationship. Anything can happen in the future. But what I can control is my own personal growth and my own personal journey. So, you know, after that last relationship ended, I was on this journey. I was like, I want to really find who I am authentically. I want to lean into the things that I was scared to even love, to show time and energy towards, like tennis. And I always use this example, tennis, not because like it sounds so trivial, but it's not, because tennis was one of those things that I was like, oh, if I'm ever single, I'll probably take up a sport or a hobby or whatever. But now I'm in a relationship. I don't have time to do that. I didn't spend time nourishing kind of my own interests. And now tennis is like my main squeeze, you know, and that is what defines me and joy and love in my life. And people who come into my life, significant relationships or not, they're not the constant anymore. And that's why I talk about I'm still in the space of single, but in a relationship.
I think actually that is, I mean, yeah, there's a lot to like unpack of like what that fully means. But I do think like having your own life and staying true to your needs, even when you have a partner, is really important. And I think in the past, I definitely could see that sometimes you'd be like all encompassed within the relationship and not have that like breathing room. So what do you think is different in your current relationship, given that work and like growth of like, I'm going to nurture myself and prioritize my own self in addition to another person?
So here's the thing. I don't think any one way is right. So I know I'm probably going to get some hate for what I'm about to say, but this is what I'm learning currently in this stage of my life, is that I've been through relationships where I'm fully enmeshed with my partner. Our lives are merged. We live together. We share decision-making together. We share life together. I had that experience. I'm not sure if I need that again.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the maverick in me speaking, or maybe it's just I talked to some people who've like been through long marriages and they're like, I don't need to get married again. I've been through it. I'm glad I had that experience.
We see that in our Facebook group a lot. Yeah.
I kind of feel the same way. So my man friend, I've talked about, he has 2 teenage daughters. We just live this life that, we're in a relationship, but it's not fully merged together. Yeah. And I don't think it will ever be fully merged because he's got his universe with his kids and the ex-wife and their whole extended family. And I've got my family. And I don't see a world, and I don't see it, but I don't think it's necessary for us to fully merge our lives. I think we can be great companions and we can be great inspiration for each other. And like, I'm very inspired in this relationship, and it's not like I want to make it work, but I'm constantly wanting to learn in this relationship. And every conversation we have, we both come out of it like, oh my gosh, that's just like, did we just unlock this new level of consciousness by asking these questions? Because you know what it is? I have nothing to lose. I'm not trying to walk on eggshells because I don't want to scare this person away. Or I hope that, they propose to me in like 3 years, or we merge our lives in 5 years. I have none of those goals. So I have nothing to lose. It's purely about me and my expansion in this relationship.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's funny because I'm thinking about that reading we did with Nikki Novo. And remember, she was saying to you, like, you're not meant for a traditional relationship, or she didn't say it in those words.
Traditional
but like,
marriage.
Yeah. Like more of just you might carve your own path.
Yeah.
And like I think in our book too, we talk about this, like getting rid of the shoulds and like actually what is it that you want? Like finding your dating North Star, because I think so many people just think it's like the cookie cutter, what we've been told, and you'd never even give it a thought. Like it's like, oh, of course I want to get married. Of course I want to have kids. Or even if you do, it's like kind of generic. Like, what does that marriage look like? You don't want to just get married to anyone. So I think it's important and not a bad thing to design the love life that works for you in the relationship. I think maybe where the question is like how much of it's coming from fear and protection.
Exactly.
Like when people say like, oh, I don't want to go all in again versus actually this is genuinely what I want. And this is true to myself and authentic. And that wasn't.
Yes. And I'm trying to be really sensitive to that. I don't want to speak out because of my maverick tendencies. Yeah. Trying to protect my heart, trying to not repeat old patterns. I want to say things authentically and want things authentically. We've been together for a little bit over a year. And at this point in our relationship and at this point in my life, I see our lives merging as much as it could. This is it for right now. This is what I know for right now. And it works very well for both of us because I always think about what do I get to do because of my stage in life. And it's not always aligned with what he gets to do.
Right.
I don't have kids and those responsibilities. I get to pick up my bag and go somewhere for the weekend or hop on a plane, fly somewhere. I can't go to tennis at 12 and decide that by 11:30. He can't.
Right.
So those are the areas. This is why I'm like, he's not really a partner yet because we don't have the same decision-making power because we're not in the same stage in life in that way. So those parts can be kept separate. And that's what I'm trying to be really cognizant of is that I'm sensitive to not coming off like this is out of fear. I want to protect my own freedom and my own privilege as a childless woman.
But maybe like this is, I don't know, like as a maverick, you've always leaned into independence. And it's almost like a way to maintain that's like you were saying, I'm single, but in a relationship. Like you have that flexibility and independence, but also have that love and connection and partnership too. So again, it's like designing what works for you. I want to go in a little more into what we'll call a sacred pause. But before we do, we're going to actually take a real pause. We're going to do a real pause and we're going to hear a message from our sponsors.
Start the new year with a new language in your repertoire. What a great time to acquire a new language when you're energized and ready to tackle a personal challenge. It's certainly on my list, and I'm so grateful to have Rosetta Stone as my handy language tutor, the most trusted language learning program available on desktop or as an app. It truly immerses you in the language you want to learn by employing fast language acquisition tools, such as no English translations and an intuitive process that helps you pick up a language naturally. First with words, then phrases, then sentences. Everything's designed for long-term retention, so you don't have to worry about forgetting that language when you actually need it. Start the new year off with a resolution you can reach. Today, Dateable listeners can take advantage of this Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 50% off. Visit rosettastone.com/today. That's 50% off unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Redeem your 50% off at rosettastone.com/today. Today.
If you're anything like me, the post-holiday blues sometimes set in. Something I love to do, though, is treat myself to something a little special at affordable prices, of course. That's where Quince comes in. I asked for a Quince gift card for the holidays, and my parents delivered. I've been obsessed with the flow knit wide leg pants I got a couple months ago, wearing them all the time, so I might need to get another pair. It pairs so well with the camel Mongolian cashmere sweater I also got from them, which also may be something I want to consider getting another one of, because at $50 for cashmere, who can resist? They also have Italian leather handbags, washable silk skirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/dateable for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/dateable to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/dateable. So what was it, July of last year, you two decided to take a break or to break up.
Yeah.
And June. Okay. And I remember you telling me, and then at that point, it seemed like you were pretty like done. Like you were moving on. You were like, this served its purpose, taught me a lot. It helped me, grow and get through that next stage. What changed for you? Like what made it come back around? And what did you learn in the time apart?
It was such a weird breakup in the way that I've never experienced a breakup like this. Yes, it was hard. And yes, I was hurt. But what I heard in our breakup was like, he was at capacity with what he's able to offer me. And I wanted more. So this is what I heard in our breakup conversation. He would say it's a little bit different.
Always different.
Well, this is interesting because it's like both of our fears coming out. He heard that his kids were the reason why I didn't want to give more in the relationship. And that was his biggest fear, was that his life choices would stand in the way of love for him. Anyway, neither of those were true. But what was fascinating about that breakup was I kind of was like, okay, if it's meant for me, it'll come back. So I'm just going to let it go, right? Let it go. And if it's not meant for me, it won't come back. And I had absolutely no ties to the outcome of how that would play out. And I wasn't immediately like, oh gosh, now I got to fill some time, or I got to get back to dating, or I got to meet people. It was a very chill breakup. I was like, okay, if it's meant for me, it'll come back. But in the meantime, guess what? Now I have more time to pursue the things I really want to do.
More tennis,
more tennis. Now I can go on another solo trip. I mean, like, life is not bad. So I'm just going to take advantage.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's, I guess, a few things I want to ask. So when you decided to part ways, it was because it felt like he couldn't give more, at least the way you interpreted it, or like Actually,
Yes.
maybe describe
Yes.
to me because I'm having trouble
So
saying it.
I felt this was the start of the breakup conversation, but I didn't think this was the actual breakup. I felt like the last domino piece in his life because he would have stress from work, stress from his kids, and then I would get the very last ounce of energy he would have left. Okay. Understandable, right? So that was the start of the conversation. What he heard in that conversation was his kids are the reason why I'm kind of
I see.
creating distance. So he broke things off. So you can see the misunderstanding or just a miscommunication in all of that. What I was actually asking for is more intentional time spent so that we can both have energy for each other. Doesn't have to be that much time, but it's just quality, intentional time.
Right. Like if you're together, you want to have him be present and not be like stressed about something else.
So, I mean, fast forward to when we did get back together, we have this kind of like process now.
Okay.
You know, in relationships like this, you create a blueprint of what happens when you experience this next time. So our blueprint is we come into each interaction when we see each other is we do a battery level check. Where are you at from 1 to 10?
Yeah.
And if you're at a 6, I'm at a 3. I have to decide, can I bring myself up? Do I want to spend some time recharging to go up to a 6? Or you as a 6, can you decide if you can be with a 3 right now? That's up to you. So we both have to make these choices. And there are some nights where he's like, I'm at a 3. And I'm like, I'm at an 8. So I'm going to go out with my friends or I'm going to go play tennis. And then maybe later tonight when my energy is a little bit drained or maybe you're recharged, we can hang out again. It's the same thing. It's like in our book, the chapter about showing up. It's the same thing as showing up in a relationship because we don't get that much time together.
Totally.
We have to be so intentional about how we show up.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating. So do you feel like you were this communicative in past relationships?
Fuck no.
Because I think that's something that's good for me to observe the way you are now. It just feels like a lot more like putting it out there to the point, not hiding as much.
Yeah, the reason why I don't have anxiety in this relationship is not really because like, oh, I'm older and wiser, but more because I'm just putting it out there. I'm saying things, I'm asking questions because I have nothing to lose. What do I have to lose? The only thing I have to lose is by not putting myself out there and then not getting my needs met. And then I end up being resentful because that's what I used to do. Just bottle it all up. It's fine. Just power through it. You'll be fine. Yeah.
Right.
Just like you can deal with it. And then one day I get really resentful. And then my partner's like, why are you so angry? Where did this come from? I didn't want that anymore. Like, that's not a way to live.
No, I really think that is the key to like a long-term relationship that actually feels good. Because not to say a long-term relationship, because I hear stories of even marriages that people bottle shit up a lot. So it's not immune. But I think for me, a big turning point was with my partner was like, I feel like I could say anything. And like, I'm not holding back. And like, I think that's so important. Like, I think in the past I was afraid I'd like scare them away.
Exactly.
But like if it's such a problem, it's going to be a problem for you.
And eventually it all comes out. It's not like you could just brush it on the rug and it'll just die. No. Everything will come out eventually.
So, okay, so you get back together. How did that whole thing go down?
He'll laugh at this one. It's actually really funny. A month or two later, he's never on Instagram. He doesn't really use Instagram, but I saw him in my stories. and I was like, oh yeah, someone's thinking about me. and I don't want to embarrass him, but it's actually very funny. He had no idea that you could see who's in your stories. He had no, because he was never on Instagram.
Oh my God,
he didn't know how it worked.
Bad. That's funny.
He didn't know that you could see who your stalkers are. Okay, and so he was in my stories, and then he sent out this email, a very long email. Kind of an email that actually made me a little bit angry because he kind of talked through his feelings and how much he had missed me and what he had been thinking about in the last 2 months. So I kind of ignored it that day. And the next day I ran into him because we live in the same city and it's a very small downtown area. So I ran into him. So I'm like, okay, this is a sign that I should respond back to the email. And that's when we had a conversation. But what led up to this conversation was I went to the Mind Valley event in Estonia.
Oh, yeah.
And I had this like spiritual awakening of designing a relationship that worked for me. Like I never actually sat down in silence and thought, if I could design any kind of relationship, what would it look like? And it was so simple. I boiled it down to one thing. I want to be with someone who equally wants to work on the relationship with me as I'm willing to work on it. That's it. It's so simple.
I mean, that is a dating North Star right there.
I mean, right? See, it's so simple, but I never thought about it in those simple terms. I was like, I want someone to be kind. I want someone to care for me. I want someone to think about. No, I just need someone who wants to spend energy working on the relationship as much as I want to spend the energy as well. So when he came back around, when we had our conversation, he basically said those words without me saying it. Like it was so aligned what he was describing. Because I asked him, like, what's your purpose for sending me that email?
Right.
And if you wanted to see where things went again the second time around, what would that ideal relationship look like for you?
Well, it's funny because I feel like all this was happening around the time when we interviewed Mark Groves and Kylie Macbeth, who kind of had this similar story. How long was this, like the time? You said June? You went to Estonia and the Mind Valley like July, right?
We got back together end of August.
Okay, so it was like 3 months, yeah. 2 to 3 months.
Something like that. I just wasn't keeping track. Again, I was like, oh, he's out there, like he's back in the universe, and if he's meant for me, he's meant for me. But when we came back around, I knew that I don't really get back together with people. It's just not my thing.
Yeah.
It was very out of character.
You mentally murder your exes is what has been your brand. But even before you got back together, you were like, this could be the one ex I stay friends with. I remember you saying that.
Yes. And the reason is because I actually liked him as a friend.
Yeah, and it didn't end on like someone doing something terrible or anything. It was just like we're maybe in different capacities or priorities right now.
Yes. And I still very much had so much respect for him.
Right.
And that's why I was like, and then we live in the same city. We will run into each other. There's just like, there's no reason why I need to mentally murder him. I wouldn't know where to bury him. All the plots are taken in my head. But it was like it was like a few months for our break. But when we came back around, I was very intentional about saying this is a completely different relationship.
Yes.
What I did murder was our old relationship. I didn't murder him, but the old relationship, I burnt it down.
I want to ask the differences, but I have a very trivial question I need to ask first. When you ran into him, did you guys talk, or was it like I saw him in passing? Oh,
it was kind of awkward because he had just sent that email the night before.
That's what I was thinking.
And then later he told me he had like a really bad night when he sent that email. So he was at an emotional low. And when I ran into him, I was with a girlfriend at a coffee shop. And I think he had just come out of this emotional low, sent out this email that he wasn't getting a response from.
Oh my God.
And he saw me.
There you guys are.
And there I was. And I had to be like, oh, hi. Because I'm not going to ignore him. He's right there.
No.
And my girlfriend had no idea we had broken up. So it must have been the most awkward exchange for her because I was like, hey, so good to see you. And I was like, you remember Mojo? Like, she must have been like, what couple talks to
she's
each
like,
other?
this is so weird.
This is so fucking weird because I didn't tell her the story at all. And so, yes, we did say hi to each other. And then when I got home that day, I emailed him back.
It's so funny because you told me all this, but it's been a bit. So.
It's been a bit. Yes.
It's like I'm like asking obviously for the listener in mind, but I'm also asking for myself in mind too.
No, good for
some
me
of the
too.
details.
I almost forgot some of the details, so it's good for me to have a refresher.
Okay, so bigger question then. What is different then in relationship 2.0 versus the 1.0?
We have this rule: we don't talk about breaking up. We just don't talk about it. Don't threaten me with it. Don't even joke about it. It's not necessary. So when we have a conflict or we encounter something challenging, the first thing we do is like we have to be physically touching to show reassurance. I'm not going anywhere. He has some abandonment issues. So I think for him, it's extra helpful for me to physically be there and like holding him. The first thing I always say is like, I love you. I'm not going anywhere. Simple.
That's huge. I feel like you would never have said that in the past.
And honestly, Julie, it's still hard for me to say now, especially when I'm so pissed or like so annoyed to just bring it down and be like, I love you. I'm not going anywhere.
I mean, I think it's one of those things, especially if you have had like either unhealthy relationships or, not serious relationships. Like, I think that was like a big thing for me too, of realizing like you can have conflict and it doesn't mean it's over.
Yeah.
In fact, it could actually bring you closer. And I think you've mentioned this on other podcasts too, like with your maverick tendencies, sometimes it's hard to like, it's easier to avoid it. Your last relationship, I think, helped with this too. But like, what are some ways that you look at yourself now of like embracing conflict and having it actually help your relationship?
Yes. And this goes back to maverick tendencies. And if you take our quiz, you might notice something along the lines of being judgmental, being critical of other people. Yeah. And I was always very judgmental and critical of people and partners and myself. So during times of conflict, the first thing I would go to is, why do you feel that way? Like, why? I don't understand. It's like judging kind of in a condescending way. I don't know why you're mad, or I don't know why that would bother you. And I've had to flip that on its head and say, okay, whatever your partner's feeling, that's their truth. That's their reality. Yep. So the first thing I do now is if I feel the need to criticize, I just pause, like, no need to say that. It's not going to do anybody any good. And that my next phrase is always like, I hear you saying this. What would you like for me to do? How can I help? Or how can I make this better? So then it becomes this effort of like, I want to honor you for what you're feeling, even though I may not agree, because that's not how I would deal with this emotion, but that's not my truth or reality.
I'm still always in awe of just like the level of deepness that I think you have in this relationship compared to the past and, maybe even relationship 1.0. But I think even in your first version, there was always more intentionality and all of that. I guess like, what is the biggest shift? Like, what feels the most different for you in this relationship, either compared to past or even compared to where you were a year ago?
Yeah. I think I don't need to prove it to anyone, including myself. I don't need to prove this relationship to work out. I don't need to prove that he's the right partner for me or I'm the right partner for him. Every day is an experiment in some ways. And all we want is love, and all we want is to get to the truth. And that's what we're constantly striving for. We have a common goal of that. And that is very liberating. That's one difference from previous relationships. The main difference between relationship 1.0 to 2.0 is that we are now past the honeymoon stage. There's the honeymoon stage can be so wonderful, yet so blinding at the same time that there are certain issues that you don't want to even recognize, or you may not even see. Now we're able to see more holistically the picture of our relationship. And I feel like we can get past the bullshit, or not even I hate to call it the bullshit, because the honeymoon period is wonderful. And it's wonderful to be like, oh my God, this person, I'm so in love with them. It's so wonderful. But some of that is a little BS, right? Because those glasses, you take those off at some point in your relationship and you're like, oh shit, okay, this person is, another person that has different views, different behaviors, different habits than what I'm used to. And we're just trying to get along.
I was thinking about this the other day randomly, of just like how different things felt at the beginning. Like, I always felt very comfortable with my partner. And that was always different from past relationships. But I think I was like a little more on still than I am now.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like more comfort, I think, is maybe the right way to put it.
And comfort is wonderful. Right? It's like comfort
is
like
it's a different stage. Yeah.
It's like a hot bowl of soup. But what I've learned in all these relationships is like you have to close out chapters in your relationship. Otherwise, you end up missing or grieving the past stages. And you never get that back. You'll never get back that first kiss you have with your partner.
Yep.
The first time you felt that crazy intense chemistry with them, or that the first time you sleep together, the first time you introduce them to your friends. You never get the first back. So you kind of just have to close out that chapter. That was wonderful. I really enjoyed feeling that. and then go to that next chapter and say, this is going to look different. I know that in previous relationships, I was always like, oh, why can't we get back that spark? Or how exciting it felt in the beginning. Or remember this time last year we were doing this? You don't get those moments back. Enjoy them while they last and then move on to the next evolution.
I know you've said this before of just like you're always dating your partner, always like going through new iterations. It almost like feels like a new partner in a way if you let it. And I do agree. I think it's important to like recognize the newness. I think something else that is important for our listeners is that it was kind of goes to the theme of what you were saying with like, I was at a stage that I'm like, I don't really care what other people think and I'm just going to do what feels good for me. I almost feel like that's how you were with dating too, because you actually like didn't really go to dating apps ever. Even the last breakup you said, like you were just like, okay, I'm going to go play tennis and I'm going to live my life and go on a solo trip and do me. How do you think your approach to dating was just different this time around? And like, maybe what did you learn from doing the book too?
Yeah. In writing the book, the last breakup happened, the breakup from the 5-year relationship happened during the middle of writing our book. And it was kind of a gift to us in some ways because we were able to look at the book from multiple phases of dating. So now I was this newly single person looking at this book versus someone who had been in a long-term relationship, right? And some of the chapters I wanted us to really focus on as a newly single person was, how do I find clarity in what I'm looking for? Why am I dating in the first place? That was really important for me. When I was single again. And then also like, what's in it for me? What's in all of this for me? What am I taking away at the end of the day? I had lost myself in previous relationships. I had sacrificed myself. So what am I taking away at the end of the day? Like, I don't want a consolation prize. I want to be able to be like, I got the grand prize, which is what? So those were the two questions I had. And I think why I didn't jump into apps or having friends introduce me, which a lot of friends were very helpful. Thank you so much for those of you who volunteered to introduce me, was I still was in this knowing energy. Like, I know that I'm going to find love again. I know that I'm going to connect with people. It's just a matter of when. And I'm not in a rush for that. Because being single is also a privilege in many ways. And I wanted to take advantage of that time as well. So just like being in the all-knowing. And I still remember the breakup from the 5-year relationship. It was the day before going to Greece. And I was playing tennis. I was against a wall. And this guy is like, hey, do you ever want to play tennis together? And I was like, universe, thank you. This is exactly how it plays out, right? I'm doing something I love. I'm living my life as should. And someone else who's like, hey, her life looks pretty great. Yeah. Like she's kind of doing the things that I kind of like to do. I want to see what she's all about. And there you go.
I mean, I think the big thing that obviously dating again during the time of writing this book, a big focus of the book is like dating on your terms and putting yourself in the driver's seat and putting like yourself at the forefront, I would say. And that is what you did. You were like, I'm going to lead with what I want to do and what I want and what gives me joy instead of feeling like I need to like do it the way, right?
Yeah. And I don't know, who were we talking to? One of the podcasts we were talking to. Oh no, I was talking to a new friend and I asked her, how does she meet her husband? And she said, oh, I was dating this guy for 2 years. And then I met her now husband at an event. And then we couldn't get together because I was still with this guy. And then we broke up for a little bit. And then we got back together for another 2 years. And then after that, I realized that my now husband is the right person for me. So we got together. And I was like, okay, the guy you just described, the 4-year relationship, that was a main character in your life for a while. And now you're talking about him like he was some side character. Like he had no name, no face. It was just like, oh, there was that guy. And I think it's like we can be main character or side character in someone else's story. You never know. But you're always the main character in your story. So speak up for yourself because nobody else will. And even though you may be a main character in someone's life right now, you may not be 10 years from today.
I want to shift gears a little, actually. But before we do, let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. So, okay, book writing process. There were definitely highs, lows. It was amazing, the challenges. What were some of your favorite parts of writing a book?
I think still to today, my favorite part was you and I putting our 10 years of knowledge into one place. That was really fun. And because sometimes we're like, remember when, and who was it that said this? Now we got to sit down and be like, okay, track down that quote. We've been quoting this person for a while, or like that piece of knowledge we got from episode, 100, whatever. So it's nice to then be like, okay, we have been working on our PhD in the last 10 years, and then now we can put it in writing.
Well, it's like connecting the dots, I think, between everything we've done and then seeing the bigger picture in it.
Yes.
So what chapter stood out the most for you and why?
Okay, the very first chapter, or the introduction, I think is still going to create ripples for many years to come. And the introduction, I know I sometimes skip introductions in books, but highly recommend you read their introduction.
Oh, I never skip the intro.
You know? Okay, good.
Never, no.
Good. They should just make it a chapter. Like sometimes it feels like intro feels optional, but it's not optional in this case.
Well, I feel like it sets up the whole book.
It does.
That's why I always have to read it.
Yes. And in our book, it absolutely sets the tone, and which is we talk about the love crisis and how modern dating is setting us up to fail. And I would go as far as to say modern dating is keeping us apart. When we are so wanting connection, we are so wanting companionship, we're so wanting a sense of belonging. And we can get all of that in a healthy, wonderful relationship. So that chapter still gives me goosebumps. And I remember telling you like the fifth time I read it, I was like, it still gives me goosebumps. I still love this chapter.
I just remember that one as I think the way we wrote this book too for insiders is like it wasn't like I wrote one chapter, UA wrote the next. It was like very collaborative on each one. So I do remember just going through like a few rounds of that. And each time just like, oh, this is getting better and better.
Yes. That was like our mark. I feel like we really set the tone there. And then another chapter is like investing. Chapter, which is just like, how are you spending your energy? And I think that chapter, even if you're not single, it still applies to everything else in life, because we are so distracted by so much shit going on in our lives. It drags our energy in so many different directions. And then at the end of the day, we feel like we don't have anything to give to ourselves or to our loved ones. So that chapter is so important as a reminder for me, is to use my energy wisely.
I still remember when we were at South by Southwest, we were at a party and you and I were there, and these like weird guys came and talked to us. Remember, we were like, we're in the zone, leave us alone.
We're writing a book, thank you.
But we were like really trying to think of like, what is like the steps? Like, it's not like dating, there's 4 steps you follow and then you find your person, but a framework of like, what were the common themes that we saw that led us to, good relationships and feeling good about dating, but also all the daters we followed that were like the cohort of people that were really like thriving in dating. I remember that just like that moment to me still stands out, that we were just like having this conversation and we're like, let it go, all the stuff. And then like one of them was, I remember you being like, there's always like a crossroads that you're at. Like, should I go on another date or should I keep dating other people? Like, should I give this person another chance or break it off? Like all this, like this question, those are usually the things we go to our group text on. So like the investing appropriately chapter really addresses like those crossroads situations, in addition to like how then do you use your time and energy. I think that one is such a meaty one. I agree. Also, the 7 things that matter. And the only 7 things that matter in finding a partner, which I remember our editor, Ronnie, was like, this alone sells the book. This is worthwhile for people.
And I think people will find this relatable, is that in dating, a lot of times you are not sure about your decisions. We're always questioning ourselves. Like, is this the right thing to do? Is this should we move forward? Should we not move forward? And I think having this kind of clear framework and knowing that you are the main character and you are the driver, you are the main consistent character in your story, then it drives all of your decisions into a more confident role. Like, I'm confident now because I know exactly what I'm driving towards.
What do you think is like the most powerful message in our book? like for you personally?
I think, gosh, I think the most powerful message in our book is to say, wake up, everyone. Wake up. We've been playing the wrong game and we'll never win at this game. It's like going to the casino. The house always wins. That's how modern dating is set up. So yeah, you get like the small wins here and there, and then you play the slots machine. You're like, I won big. But then end of the day, you're going to lose it all because the house always wins. This book, I feel like it's a wake-up call to wake up. We don't need to go to the casino. That's not healthy for a relationship. If you're looking for connection, you don't need to play by those rules. You don't need to play by any rules. You don't need to lose. There is no winning or losing. The only people who are losing are the people who think they're winning in a game, right? Because there really isn't a game.
When we say like you don't have to date the way that modern dating is set up, we're not even saying like don't be on apps anymore. That's not the message.
Yes.
Like I feel like I was able to go against the grain of how I dated in the past and how modern dating kind of operates. And I was still on apps. Like it's still a way to meet people. I think the way you meet someone is agnostic to like the mindset and just vibe you're giving off in the process.
Yes. It's the same. It's like, I like to use this example of a power drill. The first time power drills were invented and people were putting all these big holes in their walls because they didn't know how to use it. It's the same thing with dating apps. Power drills were not invented to fuck up your house. They were invented to make drilling more efficient. Same thing with apps. They weren't invented to fuck up our dating lives. They're just meant to be more efficient. But if you overuse it or use it in the wrong way, yes, it could make a huge dent in your love life. So we can still use all the tools. If you're renovating a home, you can use a power drill. You can use all the tools available to you because why wouldn't you? But just use it in a way that serves you.
Right. And we're not telling you to like go out and learn all these new skills and do all this new stuff. It's just refining what we have today and doing it in a way that feels more authentic and more, I don't know, less like draining. I think that's the biggest piece of like, how do you just feel less drained by all of this? Because I think if you're operating at like a 2, like that isn't a good energy to meet any new person.
Yeah. And what I talked about with the first breakup with my current man friend, the feeling like the last domino, we do the same for ourselves. We get drained by everything else that is competing for our attention throughout the day. And the end of the day, you're only giving yourself a sliver of your energy. You deserve way more than that. So we have to think about dating in the same way. Like, don't let it rob you of your energy.
What was surprising about writing a book, or what surprising about something that came up for you in the process even?
I think I must have ADHD because I think I was like, I cannot sit and write. Like it was really, I know that was a part you really enjoyed, was like going to a cafe and sitting, and you were really great at that. And I couldn't get in the flow of writing. So that was one surprising thing because I survived college, so I wrote papers all the time. Like, why can't I write a book? That was one surprising thing. And 2 was, I think I was surprised by how long the process has been. I think when we first talked to our agent, she was like, oh, it's usually an average 2-year process. And I was like, oh, we can beat that. I was so naive. I was like, we can beat that. We can do it in a year. No big deal. But no, it's a very long, arduous process. Yeah.
Well, I think we were finally able to hit a groove where we figured out like each other's strengths and maybe areas that weren't as strong, and we were able to play to them better instead of being like, let's just divide this up and figure it out, No,
I'm glad that we iterated on our process to find what works.
And I think people ask us all the time, like, how is it to write with another person? And I would say, like, still net positive. And, like, I think it made the book better. I think we were able to challenge each other on certain things, too, and ideas, and, like, really bring it up a level. So I think for that alone, like, having an extra person, I think also, like, we've been so in sync because we've been doing this for 10 years, too.
Yes. Like we have a similar voice, so we can carry consistency throughout the book. But I'm so glad we have complementary skills, because I don't think we would have gotten anywhere if we were both like, oh, I can't sit and write.
Well, definitely not that. But even I feel like I was maybe too verbose. And you were able to like pull it in and be like, we don't need that. Or we could shorten this dramatically. And I think you don't want two people that are just making this like a 600-page book.
Oh, can you imagine 600-page dating book?
I probably could have done it. So.
I think Julie definitely has 10 more books left in her. She's got a trilogy going on in her head.
Oh my God. I think there's sometimes less is more, and a lot of times like you also like need to make it that it's digestible, and like I've realized that I'm drawn to professions that are underappreciated, how much time and energy goes into them. I'll just use the podcast example. I remember when I first met my partner, he's like, I don't think that podcasts I listen to are edited. And I'm like, no, they are. You would know if they weren't, actually. You would know if they weren't. And I think it's like the book too. People are just like, oh, here's this book that I enjoyed. It's like you don't see all the rewrites and the revisions and like all the stuff that made it a good book.
Yeah. Same with your design work too.
Oh yeah,
people
totally.
only see the end product and they're like, oh, that's just an image. Like how hard could that be?
Or they notice when it's real bad, like the experience is bad.
Yes. The point is for you to not notice.
Yeah. So what do you think is the most exciting part about putting a book into the world?
It's our voice, and that's in writing. It's immortalized. Like, how cool is that? A book is around forever and ever and ever. And even where we're no longer on this earth, it can still exist for other people to read as relics at that point. But how amazing is that we get to put our voice in writing and put it into the universe? I
know this isn't my interview, but I'm going to chime in also.
Yeah, go for it.
I actually think the audiobook was surprisingly exciting. And I think for me, that was an area that maybe I was like, it's going to be really hard. I've heard from people that it's really hard. And I actually thought it was really fun. And I think there's something exciting about hearing this via audio. And it's funny because I'm more of the reader and you're more of the audiobook listener. And I will be honest, I've never actually listened to an audiobook.
Wow.
In my life. This made me want to go listen to audiobooks because I was like, it's so different.
So different. And it's such a, I'm not saying this just to sell more stuff, but it is why it's compelling to have the hardcover and the audio version.
Yeah.
Because you get different information from the two different modalities. I think for audio, I love hearing the personalities come through.
Yeah.
And we read the book with the intention of highlighting areas we thought were important or the point we're trying to get across. But when you read a book, you get to decide what are the important points to emphasize. So you get like a different highlight from both areas.
Yeah, and we don't have the Big Dateable energy, the BDE. We have these like little like mottos, would you call them? Like, I don't know what the right word to say is for them.
Yeah, like a motto or a mantra or like an affirmation.
Yeah, and then we also have illustrations. That was one of my favorite parts, was making the illustrations.
Yeah, there are some differences. Yes, the illustrations that Julie did, on record, Julie made the illustrations. The hardcover is worth getting just for Julie's illustrations alone. I'm not joking. But then in the audiobook, you hear like little quirks that we like, little giggles or like, you know, there's still personality in the audiobook.
Definitely.
We couldn't fully read it in a monotone voice. Like you still hear us come through.
My partner said his favorite part of the book was the fish photo.
Oh, no, people have
really
to get the book.
His favorite, but yeah.
People have to get the book just for the fish photo.
Okay. I want to wrap up soon, but I'm curious. What are you hoping for in 2025? Both professionally, in general, but then also personally, too.
Yeah. New Year's Eve, I wanted to decide on a word to give a direction for New Year's in general for 2025. And the word I came upon was amplify. That's my word.
I like that.
And I think it applies to me personally and professionally. Definitely for a book, I want to be able to amplify our voices, amplify the book so that it gets into more people's hands and that it impacts people's lives. And then for me, in my personal life, I want to be able to amplify my influence as well with my media circle, with maybe our media persona, to just be able to speak loudly and confidently into a megaphone, and not have to be like, is this the right thing to say? Or I don't know if I'm credible enough to say this. I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to amplify my voice regardless of how fearful I am of how it comes out.
And I see that in dating and relationships too, of like not being afraid to state your needs and what it is you want. It's all about amplification.
Yes. Scream it.
It's funny because the last question I had on my outline for you was if you have one word for you in 2025, because I know that you love your words.
Oh, I love my
but
words.
You answered. I don't have to ask the question.
Oh, yeah. We know each other so well.
I guess just since I don't have that question, is there anything else you want to leave our audience just this year, and any learnings that you can share? Any last words?
I'm really coming to a sense of myself now where I feel like in everything I do and everything I put out there, it's like just for the universe to take care of. And I'm saying this in such a weird way, but what I'm trying to get at is we don't need to be so worried about how we come off or how we're being perceived or even the outcome or the consequences of what we're putting out there. If it comes from your heart, it comes from the authentic you, it will be received in the right way by the right people. And we don't need to be afraid of censoring ourselves just because we could be bringing on some haters or getting to the ears of the wrong people. That's fine. Not everybody has to hear your message in the way that serves them, right? If you're intentionally putting out something that's from your heart, from your soul, that you think benefits other people, just do it. Just do it. Don't worry about the algorithms. Don't worry about comments. Don't worry about feedback. Just it's for the universe to take care of.
I love that. Okay, well, that's what I got for you. That was your hot seat interview. Thank you for being a great
return guest.
Return guest. Yeah. And I was like, what do I call you?
It's so great to be back on your show, Julie.
The most common guest we've had.
You're still my longest relationship ever, just, for the record.
You are mine too. Don't worry. Still are.
So don't worry. I'd be very worried if someone surpassed me in the time that we've known each other.
True soulmates. I said it before, but I did start crying at that part of the acknowledgements. So anyways, make sure to go out and pre-order the book. Again, pre-orders help so much, and we are in the home stretch. So you get all your freebies. Those are actually going to go away in the time it's actually released. So make sure to get on it now, because it's like $108 worth of free extras for you. Yeah. That it's really our way to say thank you for pre-ordering, because we know pre-ordering is kind of weird. It's not really like a standard, but it helps so much of this industry. And we really want the world to be more dateable, and we want to help more of you.
Putting it out there.
Okay. Do I get to say wrapping it up?
Yes, you
do. Usually it's you. Wrapping it up. Stay dateable.